Happy Monday, readers, and welcome back to my library. I've got 2 new stories for you guys today. First up, Moostache by Margie Patalini, illustrated by Henry Cole. Moostache. Moose had a problem, a horrible, hairy, prickly problem. It grew right below his nostrils and just above his upper lip. A moostache. Not a few spare hairs or shy little stubble, no mere weak wandering of whiskers on the upper lip of this moose. No, Moose had a big, bushy, bristly, mighty moostache, but a moostache that was burly, surely, mangly mess, and it itched a lot. Sure, he plucked and he tweezed, he even clipped, snipped, and teased, but his combs were still cowards, and the bristles rebelled, and his scissors surrendered. Moose was in a frizzy tizzy. The moostache was completely crimping his style. He was a great hoofer, but he could barely bop and hip hop with a moostache going flip-flop. He was a wonderful chef, but he simply could not flambe his souffle with all those whiskers in the way. And he was a daring skier, but how could he downhill race with a mighty moostache blowing in his face? Moose had to do something soon, but what? After days and days of much serious thought, Moose got an idea. He crossed some hair here, he crossed some hair there, and he tied his moostache around his neck. A moose scarf seemed to be the answer to his problem. It was so simple, so easy, and perfect. Then his moostache got knotted and mangled and horribly tangled, and those hundreds of hairs still prickled and tickled. Worse, Moose could barely take a breath with that moostache wrapped around his neck. So Moose untied, unwrapped, unknotted. Ah, he gulped in some fresh air. Another idea, he parted some hair this way and he parted some hairs that way. He heaped all the moostache on top of his head. Moustachioed antlers seemed to be ideal answer to his problem. It was so simple, so easy, so perfect, until a squadron of squirrels moved right into his moose motel. They huddled in, hoardled, and furrowed and burrowed in it. Needless to say, it became quite crowded up there on Moose's head, and heavy and messy. And very, very noisy. The squirrely chittering and chattering, squeaks and squawks woke Moose every morning before the crack of dawn, and the gopher was giving a moose one hairy headache. Moose needed his sleep, he needed his rest, he needed his privacy. Moustachioed antlers, nuts, said Moose. So he unparted, unpiled, untwisted, untwined, and said adios to the hairy horns. But now, what? The miserable moose took hold of a hunk of hair, and he wrestled it and roped it, then tethered and tied and tamed it. Ah, a moose tail! Now, that was so simple, that was so easy, that was not so perfect. Talk about dizzying do. Moose didn't know if he was coming or going, backward or forward, this way or that. He didn't know which end was which. Moose had bailed on the tail. So he thought and he thought and he thought some more, but no other idea was worth a worthy winner. Braids were a bother, a moustache sweater too sweltering, Net not. Poor Moose, his problem was truly terrible, unbearable, and just downright sad. He felt so alone, he didn't know what else to do. Then it called fate, call it destiny. It was probably dumb luck. But one day Moose tripped on his Moostache and just had no time to duck. Oomph! Pardon me, they both said as they bumped and they blinked. Then they stared, then their hearts went thump thump. She was a moose with a bouffant so bodacious, outrageous, well, it was just plain old big. Hair after hair piled higher than high, skyscraping dew of glorious curls, a tower of swirling twists and twirls, and she was simply splendid, stupendous, and absolutely superb. Of course, Moose had to ask how she did what she did to get such a do. Miss Moose winked, then whispered, just a little glue. So she helped him, fearlessly plunged a hoof into a fat pot of white gluey gloop, and carefully, oh so carefully, they glopped, and they plopped, they pasted and they pressed, they coaxed and curled every unruly, wayward whisker. Around and around they tweaked and twirled this horrible hairs until Moose, once mangy mess, was now a wondrous winding wave of marvelous Moostache. Moose gazed in the mirror and smiled a broad moosey smile. He was so happy, so glad, just giddy with glee. He looked dashing and handsome. Moose gushed, "Is that really me?" With not a care for one hair, the moose boogied and bopped. They skied downhill, even uphill, and their cooking was hot, hot, hot. So of course it wasn't long after the moose and his Moostache and his beautiful bride foxtrotted and tangled and waltzed down the aisle. Good hair days, bad hair days, they vowed to love and to cherish, and with hearts heaped with love and pots full of goop, they both sighed, "I do," glue, and promised never to part. It was so simple, so easy, so perfect, and it stuck. Oh, wasn't that so sweet? I have another story today. Follow Me Mittens by Lola M. Schaefer. Pictures by Susan Kathleen Hartung. Follow Me Mittens. "Mittens," called Nick, "let's go for a walk." "Meow, meow, follow me," says Nick. Mittens follows Nick. He follows Nick past trees. He follows him over logs. He follows Nick into the flowers. Mittens stops. He smells a flower. Flutter, flutter, a yellow butterfly passes Mittens. It flies up, down, and all around. Flutter, flutter, Mittens follows the butterfly. Flutter, flutter, the butterfly flies around the bushes. Mittens follows the butterfly. Flutter, flutter, the butterfly flies over a rock. Mittens follows the butterfly. Flutter, flutter, the butterfly flies up, up, and away. Mittens cannot follow the butterfly. Mittens stops. He looks around. Mittens cannot see Nick. Mittens runs over the rock. He runs around the bushes. Mittens still cannot see Nick. Meow, meow. "Mittens," calls Nick. Mittens hears Nick call his name. Mittens follows the sound of Nick's voice. Mittens runs and runs. "Mittens! Meow!" Mittens sees Nick. Mittens runs and jumps into Nick's arms. Purr, purr. Follow me, says Nick. Mittens follows Nick all the way home. The end. Oh, friends. Excuse me. Weren't those great stories? I was so worried Mittens wouldn't find Nick, but they did. Oh, well, thank you for reading with me today, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for some more stories.